Hi everyone. As you can see, Dazzler's here. I don't know how long she'll stay. She probably won't stay very long. So this video is pretty much for Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. I feel like as I keep going on, I am talking about the same characters over and over again, which if you've watched all my videos, that might seem repetitive, so I'll probably as needed, like condense it down into less videos because nobody wants to hear the same thing over and over again. So, especially when it comes to this calendar, there's a lot of repeats. And then if I talk about, the character in this calendar and then they show up in this calendar, then I'm talking about the same character, like 4 or 5 times. So, I'm going to try not to do that. Hopefully that means that these videos will be shorter. So for Friday, I was surprised that they actually did Ronan. And this character, this is the Clint Barton version. And of course, this character was first. She's still here, yay. Maya Lopez, Echo. And she took on the mantle of Ronan because she was working with the Avengers and she didn't want to be associated with the Avengers as Echo because as Echo, she had done a lot of questionable things. So she didn't feel like heroes like the Avengers should be associated with that sort of thing. And then when they had to go rescue Echo in Japan, Clint took on the mantle of Ronin, which, with her blessing, she gave him her blessing to continue using it. And then, Kate Bishop became Hawkeye, and Clint gave her his blessing to use that. And then there was a point where they both were Hawkeye. And then there was a point where Bullseye was Ronin, and he was part of Norman Osborn's, Dark Avengers. So, and then for Saturday, Sunday, Power Man and Iron Fist, which I've talked about a lot. And since, they brought Daredevil back, as a Disney Plus show, do you think we'll see Iron Fist and Power Man in new MCU stuff, like maybe Doomsday, Secret Wars? I feel like Secret Wars, they're just gonna throw a bunch of people in there, a bunch of cameos. We'll see. So let's see. So in this one for Friday, Saturday, we're talking about Black Panther. So this is stamp 50. And this can be found in Captain America 171, March 74. Also appears Tomb of Dracula, number 23, August 74. And this is where that is from. It's from Jungle Action 8. January 74. So in the so Black Panther predates the Black Panther political party movement by just a couple months. And in 1972, in a Fantastic Four issue, I think it was 119, he tried to go by Black Leopard, and it didn't stick though, so it was pretty much changed the next time we saw him in Avengers. Because they were trying to not trying to distance themselves from that party, just so that there was no confusion, so that they couldn't. Just so there was no confusion. It's not like the Black Panther party was sponsoring Black Panther or anything. Anyway, so yeah, it didn't stick, didn't work because people knew him as Black Panther. It just seemed weird to have him be something else. So anyway, and it was in 1980 when his feud with Namor and the citizens of Atlantis started, which was interesting. And then in the 90s is where he really got fleshed out, and the whole Wakanda being a global political power, and he was part of the Illuminati and everything, and he has the female bodyguards. Oh, now I can't think of how to pronounce their name, but you know what I'm talking about. Originally, they were introduced as like potential brides for a Black Panther, but then they became like more of bodyguards. Um, and in the 2010s, so more recently, he actually had a stint where he was the main character in Daredevil. So, and he owned like a deli or something to be close to, street level to protect people. So, and then that's Friday, Saturday. So for Sunday, Monday, again, Sunday is this. And then we have Black Widow. And I've talked about her background some. And she had like an 8-issue. Pretty much they were going to give her her own series, but it only lasted 8 issues. It wasn't called Black Widow or anything, but it focused more on her being a wealthy jet setter who happened to also be a spy. So that sounds kind of interesting. And then towards the end of the series, like I said, it was only 8 issues. It was focused more on her relationship with her, supposed father, the father figure, Ivan. And she, of course, she hasn't really gotten like her own mini series or her own series. She's had a lot of like mini series and, one shots and whatever, but she hasn't really gotten her own stuff until like the 90s. She was a background character in Daredevil a whole lot. This person who was working on Daredevil, Tony Isabella, I believe his name was, he had her leave Daredevil in like 124, and then it was even called like Daredevil and Black Widow for a while. And he had her leave the series because he felt like, she was just, being a background character for Daredevil. And he actually used her in the Champion series with Iceman and Angel that only lasted like 16 episodes, 16 issues, so that nobody else could use her because he didn't want her going back to Daredevil. So I thought that was interesting. And it's funny how writers, I get it though. After you have written someone for a while, you get kind of a little bit possessive of them. Like, oh no, this is my character. This is how I developed her. I gave her this character development. And you don't want to see her like regress to just being the background support character. And that's one of the reasons that Natasha left, is because she's like, oh, well, I feel like, I'm just, the support of you. I don't feel like I have my own life, that sort of thing. So I thought that was interesting. And of course, in, I believe 1970 is when she got this costume that we all know her for. And then when Frank Miller took over Daredevil, he actually gave her the gray costume and the short hair that we know also. And then in like, I think it was like 1999, Yelena was introduced, who's going to be in the Thunderbolts movie, which I'm excited to see. It looks like it'll be good. So I'm excited to see that. So, and then for this, for Sunday Monday, I thought this was really interesting because it was very unexpected. I was not expecting them to do this anyway. So 51, stamp 51 is Bucky Barnes, not Winter Soldier Bucky, just Bucky. Because of course this was 1975. Bucky didn't come back and he didn't become the Winter Soldier until 2005. So even though he was only in comics, he was of course first appeared in Captain America 1, and he's only in comics for a couple years because when Captain America disappeared, he disappeared. So they still thought he warranted his own stamp. So you can find this stamp in Daredevil 110, June 74. Also appears in Werewolf by Night, number 22, October 74. and it's from Tales of Suspense number 65, May 65, art by Jack Kirby. Oh, and speaking of Kirby, another interesting thing about Black Panther is that both Stan Lee and Jack Kirby claim that they created Black Panther. But they don't say that they created him together. They're saying each one says they created him separately. So, and there's really no way to determine who actually did create him. So, and then like on the cover of this, it says Tales of Suspense featuring Iron Man and Captain America at long last enter the Red Skull. You're thrilled to the battle of the Titans when the new Iron Man fights the old Iron Man. I'm faster, but he's stronger. Captain America must die. You know, that sort of thing. So, like I said, I just found it interesting that, yeah, they thought Bucky deserved his own stamp. Because he wasn't even, a popular character until he actually became, honestly, the Winter Soldier. And then that made him an interesting, popular character. So I was just surprised that, yeah, he got his own stamp, because who would have thought? Honestly, I mean, who would have thought? Because he was just, it's funny because they call him the teenage sidekick of Captain America, but really they were the same age. But it just seemed like Captain America was so much older because of the super soldier serum. And they actually met because Bucky's parents both died. His sister, I think her name was Rebecca. I could be wrong. But she went to boarding school, and their father's friend, Major, I forgot his last name, but he's in charge of like a military camp. He took them in, so Bucky stayed with him, and he actually became like the camp kind of mascot, and like it seemed like he had a proficiency for marksmanship and hand-to-hand combat. So they, trained him, and he joined. And then he later discovered that Steve was Captain America, and then they decided to become partners, and Steve, trained him even further. There's conflicting accounts, because it's like, oh, he found out he was Captain America, and then Steve agreed to train him. And then there's, oh, they knew each other. They knew who each other was, and Bucky was specifically trained to be Captain America's teenage sidekick to, corner the youth market, since Hitler had, his whole youth movement. So anyway, like I said, some of these are probably going to be combined together, since I've already talked about so many of these characters before, which should be good, because less videos, and they're shorter, because I did 4 days and 13 minutes. That's pretty good for me, for sure. So I hope you'll join me again for more videos, and until next time, bye.